Testing mic. 1, 2, 3. Is it clear?
Assalamu alaikum.
Yes,
Alaikum. Yes,
clear.
clear. Clear.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good afternoon to everyone. My name is Muazmin Abdullah, master student from KIRKHS here in IIUM, and also one of the committee members of Postgraduate Student Societies IIUM, will be your MC for today's session. On behalf of the organizing committees, I would like to extend our appreciation for your presence today. Thank you very much for taking your time to join us. Okay, for today's session is part of the CPS Unified Research Methodology Sharing Series, where we discuss key academic frameworks that shape research in various fields. This time, or today, we focus on Tawhidic Epistemology, a framework for holistic academic inquiry. And then our speaker will shed light on how this perspective integrates Islamic principles into academic research and provides a more holistic approach to the knowledge. It's an honor for me to introduce our esteemed and distinguished speaker for today, Professor Dr. Ibrahim Muhammad Zein. Professor Ibrahim Muhammad Zein is a professor from Islamic Studies and Comparative Religion at Hamad bin Khalifa University in Qatar. He has an extensive academic background and has made significant contributions to the study of religion, Islamic education, and convenience of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prof. Ibrahim also obtained his bachelor's and master's degree in Islamic studies from the University of Khartoum in Sudan before earning or pursuing his PhD in religion from Temple University in Pennsylvania, USA. He was also an integral part of International Islamic University Malaysia, IIUM, where he served as a professor here in IIUM from 1993 until 2016. He was also Dean of the KIRKHS. He was also the Dean of our ISTAC. He also was a Deputy Dean of Academic and Student Affairs here. And lastly, he also was served as a head of Department of Fiqh and Usul Fiqh in KIRKHS here in IIUM. With over 50 publications in English and Arabic, Professor Zein has made invaluable contributions on the discourse on Islamic knowledge and epistemology. Without further ado, I invite Professor Dr. Ibrahim Muhammad Zein to share his insights with us. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I mean, for how long this will the lecture should be?
The lecture should be until 3:30.
So I talk for half an hour or what?
1 hour.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف خلق الله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. First of all, allow me to thank you very much, my dear brother, for the nice introduction and the kind words that you said about myself. And allow me also to thank Professor Nur Amali for inviting me to this lecture series. And if I were to say something useful and also not to say something which might not be relevant to most of you, I would make it down to earth. And I would start also telling you this, that here in this lecture, we are making a clear distinction between two important things. The first thing, which is the craft of research. Now, the craft of research, perhaps you, as postgraduate students, have quite a lot in your training about the craft of research, how to do historical and textual research, how to do empirical research, applied research, and how to do research that would require quantitative or qualitative methods or mixed methods of research. And how also perhaps part of the craft now, which is very important to every postgraduate students, is to utilize the different applications which are available for us, AI, let us say ChatGPT or other applications for your research. These things I'm not going to talk about, but rather I'm going to talk about the philosophy of research, which would require a kind of a deep look into issues related to ontology, related to the being, the existence, issues related to epistemology, which is the theory of knowledge, answering a very pertinent and important question in research, which is, how do we know? Since we are doing research, it means we would like to know, and then this question is important. We cannot dismiss it. I needed to know what is your stand on answering this very fundamental and important question, which is, how do I know things? And of course, with this, we'll go identifying the sources of knowledge. What are the sources of knowledge? Which source that we have to utilize and which source that we have to say it is not a source of knowledge. In addition to this, we are human beings. We are not robots. So knowledge for us is not for the sake of knowledge, but for the sake of making us better human beings, better society, better world. And this would mean, what are the ethics embedded in any kind of research that we are doing? How we understand the issue of axiology, the issue of values. So in a nutshell, now we are identifying three important areas. If we were to speak about research and the philosophy of research, and to bring in our stand, which is this Tawhidic epistemology. So we are going to cover the issue of ontology, the issue of epistemology, and the issue of axiology. Now, what I'll be focusing on in this lecture, of course, this Tawhidic epistemology should be seen for us as Muslims as a unification and foundation of knowledge. I mean, Tawheed is not just you declare that La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. It's not, that's a declaration, but does that declaration has any impact on knowledge? I mean, the simple answer is yes, it does have an impact on knowledge. So, of course, I mean, in our understanding of knowledge as Muslims, we have to bring in the most essential part of our religion, which is Tawheed. So Tawheed also is a framework, an intellectual, ethical, ontological framework as well. Does that make a difference? A simple answer also is yes. It does make a great difference in how we are going to approach the world, how we are going to understand ourselves as human beings, and how we are going to relate to God, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of the universe. Now, in this regard, Tawhidic epistemology is fundamentally about the unification of knowledge. Now, that perhaps would require a background and a little bit of history as well. Now, you all know that the history of knowledge in Western civilization went through a very serious crisis when Christianity was introduced to the Western world and the Roman Empire became Christian. A very important development did take place, that the church had a monopoly on knowledge. And since it did have a monopoly on knowledge, it would say what is knowledge and what is not knowledge. And the clergy decided what is knowledge, and the clergy made it very clear for others who would disagree with it that they are going to be burned alive on the stake or maybe excommunicated from the church. And that continued and contributed a great deal to the backwardness of Europe and the Western civilization in general. Now, Western civilization has a very tragic history when it comes to the production of knowledge. It became very clear for scholars in the Western world that if they want to develop the frontiers of knowledge, they have to get rid of this monopoly of the church of knowledge. And which made it, clear in the Reformation, perhaps, which was a religious movement in Europe. And then after the Reformation, perhaps the most tragic and most bloody one that tainted the history of Western civilization was the French Revolution. And the French Revolution completely, the laicite, the secularism, completely removed the church from that monopoly that it did have on what is knowledge and what is not knowledge. And knowledge became a kind of a free enterprise, completely separated from religion and religious sources. Now, what did that mean? It meant the following, that now the human being is going to be the source of knowledge as well as the source of values. And his existence is going to be completely isolated from anything else, from the creator of the universe. So when it comes to ontology, we will start from the existence of the human being, that we have a human being, we have a human society. That is given. And what does that mean? That means if we wanted to know, we are going to focus on the sources that the human being is having at his disposal in acquiring knowledge from the external world. How the human being would acquire knowledge from the external world? Simple answers: through his senses. So through his eyes, his ears, his nose, his touching the external world out there. So the sense data became actually the primary source of knowledge. We know things empirically through our senses. Whatever we can experience through our senses and the sense data that are going to come to our mind would be considered as knowledge. Anything else which is not empirically verifiable cannot be considered as knowledge. What else? Of course, we human beings have language, isn't it? And have our mind, and therefore we will have what we will call analytical knowledge, which is in addition to empirical knowledge. Empirical knowledge is about verified through our senses. Analytical knowledge verified through our rational thinking or through our intellect, which an example for it would be like language. If you give a statement about the language, you don't have to verify the truth and falsity of that statement through your senses. A very popular example for this, if I say a bachelor is an unmarried man, so I don't have to go around and survey whether all bachelors are unmarried, and then I come to a conclusion that yes, 70% of the people or 90% of the people whom I surveyed or 100% of the people whom I surveyed, they all, when they were asked the question whether they are bachelor, they said yes, we are unmarried. No. If you know English language, if you go to the dictionary, you would find that the definition of a bachelor is he is unmarried. So it is an analytical statement. It means its verifiability depends on the language. In addition to this, also mathematical knowledge. Mathematical knowledge is by and large analytical in nature, isn't it? So 1 + 1 = 2, or 2 multiplied by 2 = 4, and so forth. So all these statements that we are having about language, about mathematics, these statements are analytical statements. You don't have to verify their truth and knowledge, their truth and falsity through your senses. Now, what else? We'll come to values. When it comes to values, we realize that we human beings, if we are going to be the source of values, then these values are relative to us. Meaning, whatever I think is okay, and my society feels likewise, then it is okay, it's acceptable, it's good. Now, it might be good for me, but not good for the society. So how are we going to settle this? Well, we can settle it through utility. If it brings the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people, then it has to be legislated or accepted as the norm. Which means now, values are not absolute, are not universal. Values are changeable, are relative to the human beings. Now, this is exactly what happened in Europe. But also, you have to keep in mind, since now we removed the church and its dictates from the realm of knowledge, now we have our own metaphysics. What is that? That metaphysics has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with the human being. So whatever I feel is the case, it should be the case. And the metaphysics, if you subjected it to this kind of enterprise of knowledge, then you come to the conclusion that there is no God, and God should not interfere in my affairs, and I am the sole the sole agent who is responsible of whatever I believe in, and whatever I believe in is up to me, not up to anybody else. And if I would like to believe in God, I believe in God, but that's very personal. It should not interfere in any social or any intellectual activities that I will be engaging in. Now, I'm not going to buy the metaphysical world of the church. I will substitute this with perhaps an empirical way which will reject completely metaphysics. I will reject completely the existence of God. Now, this is what happened in Europe and developed the secular humanistic knowledge enterprise, which became very dominant, reflected in social sciences at the beginning, and then also reflected in natural sciences at the end, because the philosophy behind the kind of social sciences and technology which has been developed in the West, the philosophical aspects of it is atheistic rejects completely metaphysics. And of course, when it comes to values and axiology, it makes values not absolute, not universal, as I said, but relative to the human being, and it will be a changeable set of values according to the needs and according to the development of the sentiments of and the emotions of the individuals as well as collectivity. Now, this is a real challenge for us in the Muslim world, because in the Muslim world, we never had that kind of tragic history when it comes to knowledge, but rather from the beginning, when the revelation was given to the Prophet ﷺ, it has this very important principle, which is the Tawhidic Epistemology, which means, in simple terms, that your senses are acceptable as a source of knowledge. If you want to approach the external world, you will use your senses to know what is there outside the world. Now, when it comes to analytical statements, you have to use your mind and accept the analytical statements so long as they are consistent with the language or consistent with the mathematical formulas or mathematical statements that you are advancing. Now, when it comes to values, now values are not relative to you, but they are absolute and they are universal. They are relational to you. It means you can realize the value in your act. And these values were given to us in the Quran in a very systematic way, and also in the Quran, which we consider as a source of knowledge. Now, if the secular humanist would confine his knowledge only to the things that we see, touch, and hear, the empirical knowledge or the analytical knowledge, and would reject ethics and values and would reject metaphysics, in our case, we say no. There are two important sources of knowledge: the world that we see, and in this regard, we are accepting empirical statements and empirical knowledge, but we are not empiricists. And we are accepting rational knowledge, but we are not rationalists. Because an empiricist in this regard is a reductionist. He would exclude anything else which is not empirical. And a rationalist would accept only rationalism would accept only rational and consistent statement and reject anything else. So he or she is a reductionist when he claims that he is a rationalist in that sense, or following rationalism, or being an empiricist and following empiricism. He is a reductionist in that regard. Is not following the Tawhidic epistemology, which would look at different levels of existence. Now, there is the empirical world, which is one level of existence. There is the rational realm, which is another level of existence. And there is the axiological level, the values, which is another level of existence. Now, you don't have to mix between these. Each one of them would have a principle to verify the truth and falsity of each through the domain or the level in which it is. Now, as I said to you, in the Quran, right from the very beginning, when the Prophet ﷺ received Surah Al-Alaq, it says, اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم. So there are two readings here. One reading of the empirical world in front of us, and another reading is in the book of Revelation, which has been given to us. Meaning, this is what? A combination of two readings in that sense, not to exclude any of them, which would mean now the sources of knowledge are as follows. The external world, which we have means and ways of understanding the external world, which are empirical in nature. In addition to that, the revelation as a source of knowledge. And this is the most important dictate, I guess, of the Tawhidic epistemology, that it unified these two sources of knowledge. It does not accept one in a reductionist way and reject the other, but rather draw our attention to a very important thing. If we wanted to know, there are tools of knowledge for each level, and we have to respect these tools of knowledge, and then we will come to a kind of a Tawhidic epistemology. So this is in simple terms what Tawhidic epistemology is all about, which also would require, as I said to you, that since the Quran came up with all the values that we needed to know, which are the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ar-Rahim, Al-Ghafur, Al-Kareem, Al-Aziz. So these are values, absolute values, which are relational to us, that we are not going to create the values, but rather we are going to realize the values in our acts. Al-Kareem, for instance, this is the thing that I always give, and we are in the month of giving, which is the month of Ramadan. Now, Al-Kareem, Karam, generosity is a value. It's an absolute value. But we, the human beings, because we have a freedom of choice, we are actually capable of realizing the values in our acts. A simple example to this is that I can be generous by putting my hand in my pocket and giving a needy person 1 ringgit. So that's an act of generosity, but not generosity. Still, generosity can be realized in unlimited ways. Meaning, there is another person who would come to the same poor man, and instead of just putting his hand in his pocket and giving him 1 ringgit, he will take him to his house, give him a decent meal, and then after that, he will ask him, why is he homeless and why is he begging other people? Understanding his situation and his predicament and trying to come up with solutions that will rehabilitate this person and make him an effective member of our society, can earn for his living, and who can also support his family and support other human beings as well. Now, that's an act also of generosity, isn't it? And you can think of a million ways of being generous, isn't it? Each one of them is a realization of the value of generosity. In this regard, our understanding of values, that values are universal, but the ways they are connected with us is a relational way where we can realize these values in our acts. This is not the case in the secular humanist enterprise of knowledge. For them, what is generosity would be dictated by the society. And it might be the case that what I've been doing might not be accepted as an act of generosity at one time in the history. Perhaps a very clear case that I will give and you can reflect upon. I tell you this, 75 or 80 years ago, in the last century, for instance, homosexuality was in all European countries and all European laws has been criminalized. So if you commit that act, you're going to be punished by the law, and the act is considered as a criminal act. But look now, that act is no longer actually a criminal act. It has been taken from all the legal documents, and even worse, if now you despise somebody and say that homosexuality is disgusting, then you are liable to be punished.
Sorry, Prof.
So what? Yes, go
Sorry,
ahead.
Prof. Just to check, if there's any slides, you can provide to us.
Oh yeah, I'll
I
send
mean,
you actually a
is there
summary.
any slide that you can present to us? You'd like to present to us?
Well, slides, no.
Oh,
But
no.
I don't mind actually. I send you a summary of my a soft copy of summary of my lecture.
Oh, all right.
You,
Thank you.
all, yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Just to
I
check,
saw-
because there is one participant asking me if there's any slide that provided by the lecturers, by the speaker or not.
No, I didn't for one reason. I felt that pedagogically speaking, when I show them, people are not going to follow what I'm saying. And since what I'm
Ah,
going to talk about is very philosophical, so if you're not keeping the people looking at your eye and you look at their eye, if they are looking at something else, perhaps they wouldn't be able to follow the
okay.
argument. But if you like, I'll just send you a summary of the lecture itself.
All right. Understood. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, all right. Now, let us just continue from where I stopped now. When it comes to axiology or values, now it is very clear that the kind of values, which now the funny thing about it is the West now and the Eurocentric position is trying to convince us that these are universal values. They are not universal. They are trying to force it on everybody. When I was here during the Mondial, the World Cup, they wanted to tell us, well, this LGBTQ plus should be considered by everybody. Why should we? I mean, 70 years ago, you were saying this is not the case. I'm not so sure whether 20 years after this, you're going to adhere to these values or you're going to change. In our source of values, which is the revelation, the Quran, we are very consistent with ourselves in our civilization and other civilizations like our civilization, including Western civilization before it is repulsive way of doing away with Christianity, we're sharing the same values that we were sharing. Now, you have to know that only Tawheed and Tawhidic epistemology would argue for the universality of values. So long as values are relative to human beings, they are not universal because they are relative to a specific human being in a specific time and locality. Now, when values are relational to the human being, they are universal. They are not going to change. And in this regard, we, the Muslims, in this case, we believe that values are universal, and the values that we adhere to are going to be seen as universal. But the values which now Western society subscribe to are not at all universal, but rather they are relative. That's a big difference between our epistemological stand, which is a Tawhidic stand, as I said, it unified knowledge and unified values, and subscribe to the position that values are universal. They are not relative to a specific society or a specific civilization. Now, this is in general, perhaps. If now we go to the university ecosystem and this Tawhidic epistemology, how it functions. Now, it functions as follows. This Tawhidic methodology now, it should have an implication on the way we conduct research. Should have an implication the way we make decisions in our university as well. It should have actually an implication in the way we will organize our institution. So it will cut across all the activities that needed to be done in a university setup. It is not something which is philosophical, floating up there, and has no implication on any of the activities that is going on inside the university. Now, if one of you asks me this question, that how this Tawhidic methodology, for instance, would affect me, I'm doing a research, an empirical research, on, let us say, social cohesion in the society. Would I be differing from somebody who is an atheist, who is looking at this social phenomenon of social cohesion? My answer to you, of course, there would be a big difference between his understanding of social cohesion and your understanding as a Muslim of social cohesion. The questions that you are going to ask are different. Therefore, the data that you are going to collect is going to be different. Because your definition of the human being is different from his definition of the human being. Your understanding of the values, which are, to my mind, universal, is going to be different from his understanding of the values, which are going to be relative, but he would insist that his relativity should be universalized. Meaning he is going to go around and tell everybody that these values are universal. And as a matter of fact, they are not. It has been proven in the history of humanity, they are not, they are relative, and they should be honest about their foundation of the ethical enterprise and come to the forefront and say these values are relative and changeable. Now, would that make a big difference? As I said, yes, makes the big difference in the kind of data that you are going to collect and the kind of things that you would consider as irrelevant and insignificant. Now, I had this conversation with somebody who was telling me there isn't much difference between Ibn Khaldun and Durkheim, and the understanding of the Asabiyya is very similar to Durkheim when he decided to understand social cohesion from his perspective as a sociologist. I said, no, it's a big difference. Ibn Khaldun, somebody who believed in God, believed in revelation, believed in universality of ethics, and his understanding of the development of the human society and the elements that would make the social cohesion is completely different from Durkheim, who made it very clear in his understanding of divinity by saying that divinity is a society being divinized. There isn't such a thing as God. The category of God is a category of the society being divinized, which also subscribe to the fact that these values that we are having for social cohesion are changeable and relative to the human being. Whereas Ibn Khaldun has a very different way. Now, where is the similarity? The similarity is that both of them believed in the fact that the human being is a social being. As we say in Arabic, al-insan madaniyun bil-taba'. Okay, that's a general statement which every rational human being would subscribe to. Second, both of them believed in the observation that you make if you want to study the society. If you want to study the society, you don't sit in your room and then reflect about the society. No, you have to go to the society, see the encounter between different people, collect the information, and then after that, you will form your understanding of the society. They would agree on this. But the big difference now, Ibn Khaldun is using empirical method to collect data. Durkheim would do the same thing, but Durkheim is a reductionist. Ibn Khaldun is not. Durkheim would say, only thing that you needed to know about the society is through the empirical method, full stop. You don't go further than this. Ibn Khaldun said, no, we have another source of knowledge, which is the Quran. We have another source of knowledge, which is the values that we human beings would subscribe to and make us who we are. And these values are universal. That's why the conclusions of Ibn Khaldun ultimately are going to be different from the conclusions of somebody who subscribed to Durkheim and his way of looking at the society. Would that make a difference? Yes, would make a difference. If you look at the other part of research, you collect the data, then you will realize that part of the data which has been collected by Ibn Khaldun are completely ignored by somebody who subscribed to the position of Durkheim. And then you would also recognize the fact that when Ibn Khaldun was making his narrative about the data he collected, he would be using this Tawhidic epistemology, which would make, that's a very important thing to be added, which would make values universal, and which also would make that the sources of knowledge are not only the empirical world, but rather the revelation as a source of knowledge. So when both of them make their own narrative and their analysis, perhaps, and their synthetic propositions, they would come to different conclusions. Now, researchers, all we know, is the data. The data cannot speak for itself. The data has to be given an interpretation. Now, how are you going to give the interpretation? You're going to give the interpretation according to the dictates of your worldview. If it's a Tawhidic worldview, then your interpretation is going to be following this line of Tawhidic worldview, which will unify all the levels of knowledge in one unified discourse. If you're not following the Tawhidic epistemology, your interpretation is going to be fragmented. Meaning by the fragmentation here is that you're going to dismiss and take away values because they are relative. If you take them and make them universal and force them on others, which is unfair. Or you decide actually to take them away from your interpretation because they are irrelevant. Now, by taking them out and saying that they are irrelevant, you are a reductionist in this regard. You're not having a unified approach to knowledge. You are very selective in your interpretation. You select the things that you think should be considered as knowledge and dismiss the things that you deemed that they are not part of knowledge. Now, perhaps examples might help in this regard. Okay. Now, if we have this example, let us say, of an empirical knowledge. Now, we had this great scientist, Darwin, when he went around the world, collect evidence for the origin of the species. He went there, collected whatever he needed to collect in his voyage, which is a very important scientific expedition, and collected the data about the different species. That wasn't problematic. I mean, the Quran is telling us, قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا. It is important for you, when you are speaking about the external world, you have to go there, collect the data. But what are you going to report after you collect the data? If you are not going to follow the Tawhidic epistemology, you're going to be lopsided. If you were to be an atheist, that kind of atheism is going to affect your interpretation of the data that you collected. That's why now they were saying these biologists now, perhaps maybe 90% of them are atheists. They don't believe in God created the world or there is God. It's because of the fact that the descendant of man, the second work which Darwin did, was a kind of a philosophical work where he reflected and wrote a report about the data that he collected through this prism of atheism, which completely rejected the story of creation, which is there in the Torah. Yes, I understand. I mean, the story of creation in the Torah does have some problems, because of the scribes, the way they formulated the Torah, but the essence of it is acceptable to us as Muslims, that God is the one who created the world. The details of the creation might be having some problems in the Torah. It doesn't have these problems in the way it has been narrated in the Quran. Now, as a scientist, if I wanted to know the origin of the world, I should be fair enough and subscribing to my position and saying, well, listen, when it comes to talking about this domain, we have to have an empirical proof. And since we are not in the position actually to have an empirical proof, because we were not there when the world was created, and we are not capable, technologically speaking, of creating a machine that will travel backward in time and see there what happened at the beginning of the world. So we should be humble enough as human beings and say, well, this question should not be part of science. That question should be answered by religion, by metaphysics, but we are not capable of answering that question. But no, these scientists, under secular humanism, they are saying, no, we are capable of answering that question, but they are not faithful actually to science and empirical methodology as well. They are doing actually scientism, not science. If you do science, you have to know that science will lead you to a certain point and cannot navigate after that, cannot give definitive answers after that, because our senses are limited. And we don't have the technology to extend our senses to go there at the beginning of the world. So these questions shouldn't be questions that would be understood or addressed by scientists. Who is going to give us the knowledge about the beginning of the universe, about what will happen at the end of our life? Of course, God, who created the world and who also revealed the books to humans for guidance. So since the source of knowledge is one, God, and God is one, so there won't be any kind of contradiction between what is there in the revelation and what is there in the creation. Issues related to metaphysics have got to be discussed, and you get the information from revelation, because they are beyond the dictates and beyond the tools and means of empirical knowledge as well. Now, I think I should read to you the conclusion perhaps, and then if there is any question that needed to be asked, I will be more than happy to answer. So I don't have to exhaust the whole hour, which has been allocated to me. I have another perhaps 4 minutes for answering one question, if there is a question to be asked. So in conclusion, this Tawhidic epistemology should be understood as a holistic framework which will have the following: that the unity of God, which is Tawhid, would dictate that there should be unity of knowledge, and would dictate that there should be unity of life. So if you want to understand life, you're not going to understand life without bringing in akhirah. So it is dunya and akhirah. So the human life is not only this life, full stop. No, this life and the hereafter. So the meaning of this life should be seen as the place where we are going to be rewarded or punished in the hereafter. this life will be meaningful if there is akhirah. If there is no akhirah, the life is not going to be meaningful at all. And the unity of the self, which is personal integrity. And in this regard, values are relational to us and not relative. And these three unities are interconnected within the Tawhidic epistemology. Now, this framework rejects what? Rejects the secular divide between religious and worldly affairs, and ensuring that knowledge serves as a higher purpose to seek truth, which would benefit humanity and fulfill our role as a servant of Allah, as Abd. Now, if a human being wanted to be completely liberated, he can be only liberated if he subscribed to Tawheed. Otherwise, he is going to be subjected to some sort of ubudiyya, some sort of servitude, even to money, to fame, to fashion, to society, to anything other than God. But if you being serving these lower purposes, then you are not serving the truth and you are not serving your Creator. Finally, in practice, this Tawhidic epistemology, as I said, would have an impact on the ecosystem of the place where we generate knowledge and we also educate the new generations. This means that Tawhidic epistemology should shape the education policies that we are going to have, the university governance as well, the values that would govern the different activities of our administration, and personal character of the students as well as the professors inside and the administrators inside the university. All these ensuring consistency between faith, which provide us with a source of knowledge, which is revelation, and knowledge that the human being would acquire through his senses or his intellect and his action. Now, knowledge which would not lead to action that would change the world to be a better world and change the person to be a better person and change the society to be an exemplary and better society is not at all considered as knowledge. We all say in Arabic, ilmun nafi', isn't it, in Islam? And we all say in Arabic, أعوذ بك من يعني هذا العلم الضار, where humanity actually would make bombs like the nuclear bombs that would destroy human life and other forms of life on Earth and use it irresponsibly, as it happened in Western civilization. I mean, to my mind, it's inconceivable that the Muslims would do such a thing throughout their civilization. They could have done that, but they never navigated on that train because of the fact that they have axiological principles that would guide the kind of knowledge enterprise that they would develop. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Ibrahim Zein, for that insightful and fruitful discussion or speech, we can say. All right. Now we move for the Q&A session. For the participants that want to ask, you may raise your hand and you can open your mics and ask the question to our professor. or you can type your question in the chat box.
Can I ask the first question? I don't know where to raise my hand.
All right. Okay, you can ask first.
Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Professor Ibrahim. My name is
Waalaikumsalam.
my name is Mariam. I'm from ISTEC. So I have a few questions. Number one, I want to ask regarding your epistemology. So do we have a hierarchy of knowledge, or is rational knowledge and revelational knowledge is seen as equal, or is there a hierarchy of knowledge? And then my second question is in the Tawhidic epistemology, are we allowed to take and borrow things from other civilization that is also considered Tawhidic in elements? Like, can we take from Greek, like what the previous Islamic scholars do, and then recreate into another form of philosophy? And then another thing on the question of metaphysics, on being and becoming. So in our contemporary world, time can be seen as something that is accelerating and changing and dynamic all the time. So how do we demarcate things that are traditional in their construct, means we cannot change this, and things that we can change? The question of being and becoming, because my research is more in science. So if we don't make certain changes, people would see us as not responding to change or not receptible to change. But I want to know, within the construct of the epistemology, what is changeable and what is non-changeable? That's my question. Thank you.
Well, I mean, Sister Mariam, thank you very much for these three important questions. And they are really relevant to what I've been talking, and I wasn't careful enough, I guess, to address them in a proper way. But that's very important, I guess, for us to reflect on these three important questions that would make a nice summary of what I said about Tawhidic epistemology. Now, is there any kind of hierarchy of knowledge? Yes and no. Yes, meaning that perhaps it is important to put revelation and revelatory information over and above knowledge that would come to us through our senses, or knowledge that would come to us through understanding the empirical world, or through our intellect. But at the same time, people would ask this, that if knowledge is, the source of knowledge is one, which is God. God is the one who created the universe, as well as the one who sent the revelation. So the external world is a source of knowledge. Empirical knowledge is a source of knowledge, undoubtedly. The human intellect, which has been endowed, the intellect which has been endowed by the human being, is also a source of knowledge, undoubtedly. And revelation also is a source of knowledge. Now, when there is an apparent contradiction or conflict, which one are we going to follow? I would answer this as our scholars did. We're not going to follow one against the other, no. Because the assumption is that there shouldn't be any kind of apparent contradiction, because of the fact that the source of knowledge is one. And Tawhidic epistemology is about this unification. So the moment we make a hierarchy, now we are saying, no, the source of knowledge is not one. Now, how are we going to go about when there is an apparent contradiction? Are we going to say there is a source of knowledge, there is a hierarchy of knowledge? If it is from the revelation, then we stick to it and full stop. whether there is an empirical knowledge coming to us contradicts the knowledge that is given to us through revelation, then we have to follow revelation and disregard the empirical knowledge. Our ulama said no. I mean, you have to know and subscribe to the fact that the source of knowledge is one. And any contradiction is an apparent contradiction. It's not real. How are we going to resolve the contradiction? We look at the scientific fact that we established. Is it absolute or probable? We look at the piece of information which has been given to us in the revelation. We look at the sanad and we look at the meaning. If let us say the sanad is mutawatir, which is the Quran in this case, the hadith, not all the hadith is mutawatir. Okay, now we look at the meaning. If the meaning is zanni, then we're going to accept the scientific fact over and above the information that is coming us from the revelation. It is because of the fact that the scientific fact here has been proven without any doubt. Now, the revelation, the revelatory information that we are having, the sanad, yes, is mutawatir, but the meaning of it is zanni. That means there are different meanings. People do not agree on only one interpretation of that information. Now, what we will do, we will try to give an interpretation which will be in line with the proven scientific fact. If it is the other way around, we will go with the revelation. If both of them are having the same probability, of course, in this case, we will go with revelation. And still, you have the right actually to go with the scientific fact if you feel that it is more probable than the meaning which is there in the scientific information. Now, to answer your question about the hierarchy is very tricky, but I myself would prefer that we do not give a hierarchy, but rather from a Tawhidic epistemology, we say that we believe in the unity of knowledge, and we believe that knowledge is coming from God. He is the one who created the universe, of which we will understand through our empirical methods, and He is also the one who revealed the text to us, of which we will understand through our intellect and interpretation. Now, the second question about borrowing knowledge, of course, Muslims did that and did that intelligently. And when they did that, they did through this method of whatever is in line with the revelation and the human intellect, they would accept. Whatever is contradicting Islam and contradicting the values of Islam, they rejected. When they translated the Greek philosophy, when Ghazali came, he realized that we cannot accept the eternity of the world as a principle because it goes against the whole idea of creation. It goes against the Islamic principle that the world is being created and the world is not eternal, the world is temporal. So that he developed a number of arguments against the position of Aristotle and the position of Farabi and Ibn Sina after him, and rectified this and say, rationally speaking, we cannot subscribe to the idea of the eternity of the world. And more to the point, Muslims did not actually translate the Greek plays, because the Greek plays, the Greek drama, were based on tragedy, and tragedy is completely against the Tawhidic values and the Tawhidic epistemology. That's why the Muslims never actually wasted their time in translating the Greek drama. And there are other things which are not relevant. Muslims did not translate and felt that that's a waste of time, and they are not in line with the Tawhidic epistemology. As also a great Muslim mathematician and scholar of religion, Al-Biruni, when he went to India, he translated the kind of sciences and mathematics which are beneficial to the Muslims, and the ones which are not, he decided just to ignore because they would not contribute to knowledge and they would not be beneficial to Muslims. Even when he translated their religion, Brahmanism, he made it very clear that this kind of religion, though we want to understand as it is, but at the same time, it's not in line with the Tawhidic paradigm and the Tawhidic worldview that we subscribe to. Finally, about being and becoming and the change in society, as well as in the way we conduct ourselves as human beings. And it is very clear for us as Muslims, there are permanent things and there are changeable things. And our fuqaha made it very clear to us that the fatwa would change according to the place and according to the time. There was a time, I guess, look at the Masjid al-Nabawi, for instance, or the Kaaba. Yes, that's the place where the Prophet ﷺ established the first mosque. But are we going to insist that we leave the mosque as it is from the time of the Prophet up until our time? Of course not. The building materials are different. The way we organized the city of the Prophet ﷺ is completely different from the way it has been organized at the time of the Prophet, or maybe 100 years after the demise of the Prophet. But is there any change in the way we conduct the 5 daily prayers in the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ? No. It's the same prayer which has been conducted at the time of the Prophet by the Prophet himself. We are conducting it in the same place where the Prophet was conducting the 5 daily prayers. Now, what is permanent here is known to us. What is changeable is also clear that it should be changed because of time and space issue. So we're not going to be traditionalist in a sense that whatever is connected with the past, we will be part of that past without changing that past. No, that past does have elements which are susceptible to change, and they are not permanent, and they were not meant to be permanent. If they were meant to be permanent, then there shouldn't be any kind of ijtihad. But the only religion that does have ijtihad and cherish the fact that there should be ijtihad is Islam. Other religions, actually, if you make an ijtihad, then you will create another religion. But in Islam, no. You have to make ijtihad to differentiate between permanent elements in Islam and changeable elements. Changeable elements are susceptible to change, susceptible to the dictates of time and place. Permanent things are going to be permanent, not changeable, no matter what. They are going to be the same. I gave you the example of, let us say, of the Umrah and Hajj and the visit of the Mosque of the Prophet. If somebody is going to come from, let us say, 200 years ago, he wouldn't recognize the Medina, isn't it? Wouldn't at all recognize the Medina. And he wouldn't say this is bad. I don't think he would. But when he goes inside the mosque, he wouldn't have a problem actually praying like us. He wouldn't have any problem praying like us. He wouldn't be actually trained or retrained to join the Jama'ah. He will just get to the Jama'ah and pray the way everybody else is praying, isn't it? If he goes to the place of ablution, which is susceptible to change, isn't it? He has to be advised on how to turn on the tap and how to. But when he sees the water, I guess the way he's going to do the ablution is the same way that the Prophet ﷺ did and the companions and Muslims after him up until our time. So this is a very simple example of being and perhaps becoming, and how the change would affect only the changeable aspects of the religion and would not be affecting the permanent parts of our religion. I hope I answered your question, Maria.
Yes, thank you, Prof.
Oh, you're welcome, really.
All right, thank you very much, Prof, for the answers. We have 3 more questions. The first one is from Anas Budiharjo. Dear Prof, if we use Tawhidic methodology in our research, are we still allowed to employ qualitative and quantitative method in our research? That's the first question. The second question from Jahan. Assalamualaikum, Prof. May you have book suggestions on this topic? Okay, and the last questions from Suryati. Salam, Prof. I would like to inquire you on atheism. Whether is it total rejection of existence of God or only religious practices? Also, is it only related to rejection of Islamic Tawhidic only? Thanks, Prof.
For Anas, yes. I mean, we Muslims are going to benefit from qualitative and quantitative method. And of course, I mean, we've been doing this. Now they're calling it qualitative and quantitative method. We've been doing this. I mean, if you look at a great Muslim scholar like Ibn Khaldun, for instance, I mean, he was doing this. Bayruni also was doing this. Nothing wrong with these tools, so long as they are crafts. But the problem between me and somebody who is not following the Tawhidic epistemology, he's going to be following empiricism in this case and narrowing down what needed to be considered as knowledge. For me, of course not. I mean, the kind of survey, the kind of questions I'm going to ask is going to be different from the kind of questions which are going to be asked by somebody who is an empiricist. That would make a big difference. I mean, the instrument that I'm going to follow and the questions that I'm going to ask to obtain the data, of course, is going to be influenced by my worldview. If I were to be an atheist, I would be asking, or a secular humanist, I would be asking questions regarding my topic, which are in line with my worldview. That's why sometimes when there is an instrument being developed in the West, always, and you want to use it yourself, they would tell you, you have to adapt this to your society. And I would go further. Because of this Tawhidic epistemology, you have to adapt it also not to your society and its needs, but also to your worldview. You might be asking questions which are not going to be asked by this person. So that's one way. At the level of collecting the data and developing the instrument, we are going to be different. We're not going to be the same. Now, at the level of interpretation, of course, our interpretation is going to be different. So the results of the research is not going to be the same. Now, the ethics of research also are going to be different. As I told you about this relativism and universalism, we are universalistic. They are not. They are relativistic. And that's going to affect the narrative or the interpretation that they are going to develop after they collect the data. So to answer your question, we'll use these methods because they were used by Muslims. Perhaps they were not called qualitative or quantitative as they are called now, but they were used by Muslims. They are not new to us, not at all. I mean, if you're familiar with the tradition of research and learning in Islamic civilization, there is nothing wrong with these ways of understanding the subject matter. But the problem now is about the instrument, and the problem also is about the interpretation that we are going to give to the data that we collected. Now, I hope I answered the question for Anas. Suriati, I mean, atheism, perhaps there are different levels of atheism. Agnostic, perhaps, is different from an atheist. But generally speaking, an atheist does not believe in religion, full stop. Whether this is Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, does not believe in there is a life after this life. Is, by and large, a materialist. Does not believe that he has been created by a creator, and would reject revelation as a source of knowledge because he did not believe in his creator. Now, a secularist, of course, there are different types of secularism. Okay, some of them could be atheists, some of them could not be atheists. But when I brought in atheism, I meant those who completely rejected religion and rejected the existence of God and rejected the fact that we have been created by the creator of the universe. They don't subscribe to this. They believe that we've been part of the evolution of matter, and when we die, we're just going to go back to the circle of life and death again. I mean, we are going to be decomposed into the molecules, and then our molecules will go into another life form. And then that life form, when it ends, it will go back and decomposed and maybe generated in another life form, and so forth. It means religion is completely rejected and disregarded also in this sense. But this is the way I use atheism in my lecture. But if an atheist would like to tell you that I believe in God, but I don't believe in Christianity, he's not an atheist. He's agnostic. It means he believes there is God, but he does not believe in the institutionalized religion because he had a very bad experience with Christianity, perhaps, and he thinks that Christianity is not giving the answers, the rational answers that he is looking at. Is there other question? I guess I missed.
There is one questions from Isras Jahan Chaudhuri. Assalamualaikum, Prof. May we have book suggestions of this topic?
You mean a book that you can read?
Yeah, regarding these topics.
Oh yeah, I would suggest Farouqi's book, which is Tawhid and its implication on life and thought, and also the work of Professor Usman Bakr, director of the university, Classification of Knowledge, is a seminal work in this regard. And some other works of Professor Usman Bakr as well. I mean, he extensively wrote on this topic, and I think when he started his scholarly career, his PhD dissertation was on classification of knowledge, which is by and large, I guess, details some of the things that I said in my lecture. So two sources perhaps, but not excluding other sources as well. There are other important sources as well, but sources I feel are in line with what I said. Ismail Raji Farouqi's book on Tawheed, At-Tawheed, and the work of Professor Usman Bakr, director of the university, the current director of the university as well.
Okay, I thought all the questions have been answered by our professor. All right, thank you very much, Professor, for your insightful answers. Prof, will it be possible for us to get a copy of your summary so we can share it with the participants? I'm sure they will greatly appreciate it.
I will send it to you. I'll send it to you right now. Okay? I'll send it to you right now. The summary has been made, actually, as you would realize. The summary has been made by Professor Shukran and another professor at the Department of Psychology in my last visit to IIUM, which I gave more or less the same lecture. Okay, so I'll send a soft copy right now after the lecture, inshallah.
All right, thank you very much. Alhamdulillah. Okay, we can end our session. Alhamdulillah, we have reached the end of today's sessions. We extend our deepest gratitude to our Professor Dr. Ibrahim Mohammed Zein for his valuable insights. A big thank you to all participants for your active engagement. We hope this session has been beneficial and will contribute to your academic pursuits. Before we end, we kindly request all participants to fill in the feedback form, which will be shared in the chat box. I think it's already been shared. Your feedback is highly appreciated. Once again, thank you for joining us. May we continue to seek and share knowledge for the betterment of our academic and personal lives. I think before we end our session, we need to take a photo session first.
Okay.
I think for the participants, you may open your camera for our documentation. All right. Okay. Okay. Sami, are you ready?
Okay. But I think there's another 2 or 3 can open a bit more. Okay. All right. I think okay. Okay, ready to go? 1, 2, 3. Okay, wait, another time. Okay, wait, Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Thank you so much, all.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. With that, I bid you all with Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for joining us.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, bro.
Thank you.